Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of the Sussman Original Show. Today, we have a very special guest. Well, me. And for those of you not familiar with your host and are curious about my background, where I hail from, what led me to start this podcast, and all that stuff, well, sit back, relax, because it's going to be a bit of a salacious interview, if you will. From California to Switzerland, gaming to martial arts to podcasting. My path has been anything but traditional. So we're going to talk a little bit about my overall life story, my faith, various hobbies and interests of mine and whatnot. And without further ado, on with the interview. So, as usual, I like to start at the beginning. And so I went through and I was typing up a little bit of like a little bit, not a script, but a little outline or whatnot. And then I realized I might as well be writing a book. I mean, if I'm just going to type everything out. So we're going a little bit off the cuff here. So pardon the occasional ramblings, but I did try and type out some of the specific dates and whatnot. So if you see my eyes flicking from side to side, if you're watching this on YouTube, that would be why. So, all right, the beginning. I was born in San Jose, California, which, if you're not familiar with it, it's a small city of about 1 million people or so, right in the heart of the Bay Area, originally the center of Silicon Valley, so saith Wikipedia. And then disclaimer, a little bit of a disclaimer, early childhood stuff is going off of what I've read in my file and memories of what I've been told. And as such, I'm not 100% sure on exact numbers, but I think they're correct. I should be solid. But yeah, so I was born on the streets, literally, like 5th Street, 6th Street, 7th Street, 8th Street. Or in other words, I was born in an ambulance due to my birth mother playing a little fast and loose with, well, drugs. I was born something like 3 weeks premature and ended up staying in the hospital for around a month afterwards because all sorts of complications and things like that. Birth father was out of the picture, so don't really know anything about him. So I stayed with my birth mother and her parents. Random aside, my birth mother was black, and so I know that side of my heritage. As for the other half, I remained clueless until I did some DNA testing, 23andMe, and it said, well, it confirmed that it's half black, or if you want to get into specifics, the nitty-gritty, 41% sub-Saharan African. Maybe I'll make a video or something going into the further details or what have you, but yeah, 41% sub-Saharan African, and then DNA testing said I was a 27% Native American. So, surprise. And 29% European, but that's like pretty mixed European and stuff. So that was kind of cool. And yeah, so I lived with my birth mother and her parents, but unfortunately there was a bit of a history of mental illness or whatnot in the family, and so it wasn't the most suitable household for a young child. And so Child Protective Services was called when I was about like 3. And so then I got to experience the wonders of our foster system in America, which, spoilers, really isn't that wonderful, but still it could have been a whole lot worse. It wasn't a great time, but I don't remember much about it really at all. I did have some great foster parents at some times, so that's cool. I do have 2 like predominant memories. One was climbing into a big old cardboard box of toys, and then the box tipping over and like toys spilling out or something. And then I remember one of the foster homes had 2 dogs, and like a black lab and a golden retriever. It was awesome. Yeah, I also have like 2 photo albums nearing the end of my time there, so that was really cool. Because, I don't know, memories can be pretty fickle things, and so it's cool to be able to see some of my foster parents or caretakers or whatnot. Even to this day, I'm still not completely sure what role some of them played, but I remember their names and their faces, thankfully. So I'm super thankful, and for everyone who does work in that system, you guys are, underrated heroes, just straight up heroes. Yeah, so that was my life for a bit, in and out of foster homes and whatnot. Then around when I turned 6, I had a pretty major turning point in my life. I ended up having a spot on a short television program called Brian's Kids. And you see, back then, before the age of the cell phone and easy internet access, if you wanted to know what the weather was like, you had to actually check it out on TV, believe it or not. As such, it made for a pretty great platform to raise awareness about various things. So the local weatherman of the Bay Area had a segment called Brian's Kids, where he would basically showcase a kid who was up for adoption each week. It was pretty awesome. They'd play with a child at a park, and a kid might say a few words or something to the camera, and yeah, that's that. It was pretty cool. So Brian and his family were Christians, and him and his wife, they had a daughter and 2 boys, and both the boys were adopted, and they felt a calling from God to adopt the little child that they actually had just on the program. And the oldest boy relayed that he actually had a dream about that child, which is pretty crazy. I mean, if you come from a non-religious background, you might say that's super crazy, but hey, life's crazy. So the young child ended up adopted by the host of the show, and the child had a family now, which was pretty cool. And shortly thereafter, my sister, my only sister, but the oldest, she ended up leading me to become a Christian. And one kind of crazy thing also was that before I was adopted, I had tons of nightmares and just terrible dreams. I mean, relentless stuff, shadowy figures, and not great stuff. I can actually remember some of it. And around the time I became a Christian, was adopted, they went away. So whether that was the result of being in a family and my beliefs or some combination of the two, I don't know. But it's pretty cool. Then as a child, I loved reading. I'd go to the library and purposefully pick out the biggest books from the young adult section, since I didn't want the stories to end so quickly. Though, kind of funnily enough, I was always intimidated by the series with like 1,000 books. Here's looking at you, Star Wars novels. So I always wanted to read them, but I never ended up picking them. Maybe partially because I never knew where to start. The old analysis paralysis. But I think my rather voracious reading or whatnot habits, I think that's where my verbosity stems from, for better or worse. And pretty much when I wasn't reading, I was gaming. I mean, I actually have a picture of, I discovered this recently in one of my photo albums, a picture of me gaming. If you're watching this on YouTube, there's a picture of young Josh sitting at the computer playing what looks like some sort of Arthur game. It's kind of fun. Yeah, so from a very early age. And then, as the youngest of 4, I didn't necessarily have all the newest stuff, but it was still pretty cool. And speaking of gaming, I guess we can get into that a little bit. My first real console I ever got to play was the Super Nintendo. My oldest brother, Sam, he had a friend whose parents made him give his away, along with all of his games. So thank you, Brandon, for the Super Nintendo and the big old plastic box full of games. We had a lot of fun. We had a bunch of the classics like Super Mario Brothers All-Stars, which had Super Mario Brothers 1, 2, and 3, and Super Mario Brothers Lost Levels. We had Super Mario World, which would become one of my favorite games. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie, the game. I think that was like a Double Dragon ripoff or something. I don't know. It was a beat 'em up, and it was super fun. You chose your Power Ranger, beat dudes up. It was rad. We also had Donkey Kong Country 1 and 2. We might have had 3 or might have bought 3 at a later time. I can never remember. And we had NBA Jam. He's Heating Up, and a few others that I'm kind of blanking on right now. Notably missing were things like Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past, or Street Fighter 2, or Super Mario RPG, Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy. Didn't really have any of those because we didn't really buy any. I also ended up getting a Sega Genesis, so that was my first console that I had. And that had Sonic the Hedgehog and Bram Stoker's Dracula, which I couldn't play because it was horror. I don't remember if they had ratings at the time, if it was rated M, or if it just looked really scary, and so I was forbidden from playing it. So that was super, super fun. So we had the Super Nintendo, and we missed out on the Nintendo 64 entirely, which after doing a little bit of Googling, I discovered they actually overlapped, and that the Super Nintendo, or the Nintendo 64 was discontinued in 2002, I believe, whereas the Super Nintendo was discontinued in 2003. So it's kind of fun. It outlasted it. So we had that, and we had like all the Game Boys. So my brothers and my folks had the original Game Boy, and then that was lost by the time I came around. And I remember my brother had the Game Boy Pocket, which, he would later go on. This was the middle brother, Ben, so my older brother, but not the oldest. He had a Game Boy Pocket that he would go on to sell me for the extremely pricey number of $5. And I still have that Game Boy Pocket right here. It still turns on. I believe I unplugged. Yeah, I took out the batteries so they wouldn't explode. But yeah, as of me last checking, still turns on. It's surprisingly not scratched up that badly, like really at all. Works like a charm. Though I have lost quite a few of those old Game Boy games. I still have the original Star Wars game, which I could never get very far in, and James Bond, which also I think I got to the very end once, but never, I don't know if I ever beat. Also, there's a phone number on here. I should ask the folks about it, whether that was a home phone or something. That was, because I recognize the last 4 digits. That's really funny. I've never paid much attention to that. We were also big Pokemon fans, kind of. I mean, Pokemon game fans. I remember both my brothers got Pokemon Blue. Why one didn't get Red and one Blue, to this day, is a puzzle that I've yet to solve. But yeah, so they both got Blue. And I would, peer over their shoulders, and occasionally the amount of times I would start a Pokemon game, but because there was only one file save, I would have to delete it because, you don't want to save over the older brother's game. It hurts. I also would later go on to buy Pokemon Yellow, which would remain one of my favorite games. But yeah, we had like pretty much every Game Boy. Game Boy Pocket, Game Boy Advance, which I took my Game Boy Advance everywhere, to the point where I actually bought one at a flea market a few years back because it was just such a handy system, and you could always carry more batteries. So you never had to worry about charging if you had enough batteries. And Pokemon Fire Red would go on to blow my mind. Same with like Sapphire. Random aside, my brother Ben actually found this cartridge on the roof of our school in a puddle. Why he was on the roof of the school, beats me. But it worked, and yeah, I spent so much time in those games. But yeah, we had pretty much that, and then we basically had just about every Nintendo console. So we went after Nintendo 64. We would go on to get a GameCube. So I think Ben got that for his birthday, and I would later buy it from him for $50. And Super Mario Sunshine, so many good memories. Super Smash Brothers Melee, I spent so much of my childhood playing. Remember, there's also a couple of SpongeBob games that I played. Though I was always wondering why the SpongeBob games could never match the quality of some of the other titles, licensed games I would later learn on. And I spent far too much time on when we were discovering the internet and whatnot. I spent a lot of time on cheatcc.com, if you remember those. Good times, man. Reminiscent. I've played a lot of games, probably maybe a little more than I should have, but it was a cool way for me to connect with other kids, and I moved around a lot. My family did in the Bay Area, so it wasn't like too crazy, but still moving schools. It was a cool way for me to make friends and invite them over and beat them in Smash. Also, Fire Emblem. I still have to get Fire Emblem Sacred Stones from an old friend in high school because he's been holding on. He borrowed it, and then I never got it back, and we lost touch. I'm going to hit him up one of these days because I need that save file. But yeah, so it was fun. A lot of fun in GameCube. I remember Nintendo DS came out. Ben got it for his birthday. I would go on to buy his DS off of him. I'm noticing a pattern here. He was quite the salesman, and I don't know. I got an alright deal. He wasn't ripping me off, so that was cool. But let's see, what else happened around that time? High school was fine. It was I wasn't a great student, but I wasn't really a bad student. I had ADD, still do, ADHD, ADD, whichever of the two, to the point where I actually did get some like meds for it, so like Adderall for a little bit, but if you can't tell, I'm not exactly the thickest person, so one of the side effects of that was a complete loss of appetite, and it upset my stomach and stuff, so I actually kind of kicked it. I didn't like the personality change it gave me. I just felt a lot diluted and I don't know, or dimmed. So I wasn't on that for very long. But yeah, so school was a little tricky. If I was interested in a subject, no problem, easy. If I wasn't, like math or languages, I just wasn't very interested in putting forth the extra effort to do it. Or like math, I would put forth the bare minimum to do it, but then I'd be very easily distracted, and yeah, it's just not super fun. And then later on in high school, I actually ended up doing something called part-time. So we moved about an hour away to the place I'd kind of call, I don't know, my hometown now, which is Santa Cruz, before I came here. And Santa Cruz was about an hour away from my school, so I ended up going to school Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday for my last 2 years of high school. And it was cool because Wednesday, I actually got to spend the night at one of my best friend's house. So that would be Matthew Clope, who we had on the podcast earlier. So I'd spend Wednesday night at their house, and they became like family to me, which was awesome. And then, I could go to school with them Thursday, which is cool. And yeah, just learned a lot, did some like volunteer work during that time on my off days, because it was basically, when you're not in school, you just do the homework and it's fine. I worked at a local marine center, so not the Monterey Bay Aquarium, which is the big aquarium in the area, but a smaller one that does a lot more research. So I think that's part of where my love for like animals came from. That, Steve Irwin, rest in peace. I watched a ton of Animal Planet, and he was my favorite. I loved the movie. I had hair on my face. Crocodile Hunter, the movie, so great. And then that's kind of like, it's interesting. So my love of like my geekdom kind of comes from around that time of, let's see, I'm just trying to think where to even start with all of that. So we had a TV that was pretty cool, and we had a really big one in the garage that I would put a magnet towards to see what would happen. Spoilers, if you put a magnet on those old TVs, it leaves a giant green mark wherever the magnet is, which I didn't really know until I turned the TV on. And I completely destroyed a big old box TV. But at some point, we had a TV, a small one with a DVD, VHS player, and maybe as they started becoming a little more obsolete or whatnot, I ended up getting it, and so I remember hearing so much about these Star Wars movies, because This was around the time when the Phantom Menace had just come out. Maybe episode 2 had just come out or something. And I was a little young to exactly know what was going on, but I saw the action figures in the stores, which were super cool. I had my Mace Windu action figure for a long time. And so I remember we had the original trilogy, actually, of Star Wars films. And I remember plopping them in that TV to check it out and see what it was all about, and my mind just being blown. Yeah, it was just one of those kind of cool, fortunate things where it wasn't like, I don't think anyone like made me watch them. I was just curious, and I just thought it was like the coolest thing ever. And so the original Star Wars hold a very special place in my heart. And I remember renting the games too from Blockbuster. Also, rest in peace. So that was super good. And then I got into comics a little bit as a kid because one of my friends at the time, he helped his neighbor with a garage sale. And his neighbor was selling a bunch of comics. And so as part of the garage sale, so as a thank you for helping him, he let my friend borrow some of his comics. And the guy was kind of older or whatnot. And so then, as a result, I borrowed some of the comics from my friend. And so the first, stack of issues that I borrowed were Secret Wars, which also holds a very special place in my heart. And I would go on to get and so I thought that was super awesome. We were a bit into eBay at the time too, this wonderful invention. And so I saved up my money and I bought Secret Wars off of eBay for like $60 or something at the time, which was so much money. But to me. But I saved up and I bought it, and I would later go on to actually get my copy of Secret Wars number 8 signed by Stan Lee himself. That would be last year, and it was at his last appearance at the Silicon Valley Comic Con when he would pass away a few months later, which was really sad. But yeah, I don't know, it was super cool. I got to at least keep a portion of history. And all right, I think the recording's still going. I just noticed my computer actually went to sleep right there, but I don't know if you guys noticed that. Anyway, so I have that portion of history, which is really awesome. And so that kind of sparked my interest in comics, and I was familiar with it. I really liked Spider-Man, at least from the TV shows and what I could catch, but I didn't really know too much about him. So Secret Wars was a great introduction to all these different colorful heroes, and Spider-Man would go on to be my favorite hero, like many other kids. And I think because of Secret Wars number 8, Black Suit, Symbiote Suit Spider-Man would be one of my favorite versions. Still waiting for a really good version of that in live action. So I like comics, but I was more of I like solid storytelling as opposed to super long. So I was also a big fan of, that led me to DC because they had a bunch of really good solo storytelling, whether it's like Dark Knight Rises or Dark Knight or I don't know, even some of the spin-offs like Red Sun, DC The New Frontier. It's one of my favorites. I just actually read it with my wife. We just finished it because I wanted to show her. Amazing. Please adapt that. Use that as your source material for your next Justice League movie reboot. DC, come on, please. Anyways, so I was pretty into all of that, but I was never, huge buy the issues weekly. I always wanted to, but there was never a comic shop close to me, or at least I didn't find one. And then I could totally see myself having done that though if I ran into it. So yeah, it was pretty big, but it wasn't crazy. And then I was always into movies and film and stuff. That was one of my favorite classes in high school, despite the fact that was the only class, film studies, that ever got a D in. Or ended with a D in, I suppose, because math and Spanish, I routinely have D's and then miraculously pull it off at the end and get a C minus. So that was cool. But film studies, which was funny because film studies was like one of my favorite. It was like easily one of my favorite classes. I actually did the work. I don't know, just behind the scenes stuff I think was going on that wasn't great. But anyways, it's neither here nor there. So I've always had a bit of a love for film and all of its aspects and what goes on behind the scenes, the cinematography, and just stories in general, which I think is in part of why I wanted to start this podcast, because I like hearing people's stories and the stories that folks have to tell. And so there we are, high school's wrapping up. I have no idea what I want to do with my life. I'm interested in computers, computer science, that kind of stuff. And I've like dabbled. I took all the computer classes at my high school, ranging from, programming to computer-aided design to film it, I don't remember what the film class was called, but that was pretty cool. Just all that stuff. It was really cool, but like I didn't love programming. It was cool. I liked what you could do with it. I thought, oh, I want to be a game developer. But also I had that drilled into my head that like game development is not easy. Everybody wants to be a game developer and few succeed. Most people fail in their dreams or whatever. So I was like, and I think that was actually a little unhealthy to the point that was so vague. So it got to the point where I was like, okay, well, obviously I can't do that. So maybe I just do like software or something. But still not 100% sure. And then one of the things I knew was that I wanted to travel. One of my other really good friends was from China. And so, or his parents were from China. He's Chinese. And so I got to spend 2 weeks with him in China, and that was an incredible experience. We lived, I believe, about an hour outside of Beijing with his grandparents. Got to see the Great Wall of China, Forbidden City, Tiananmen Square. It was awesome. And my school, I went to a Christian school, and so the school I went to, they did a lot of missions trips as well. And so that was a really cool opportunity. Everyone goes to Mexico for the first year of high school, and then you have the flexibility to do whatever. So I think for the next 2 years, I went to Peru. I went to Peru, and that was really cool. Got to go in like to Lima, and we spent a week at a, what was it? Yeah, okay. So we spent a week at a disabled children's orphanage, which is kind of a thing. But yeah, so we spent a week there at an orphanage for disabled children. There you go. And that was crazy. I mean, like, I remember one of the kids, she actually had like some pretty crazy face scars from like a panther attacking her. Like literally it was on the roof of her house at night, jumped on her, and then her dad, managed to scare it off. But like, it got pretty real down there. And so we helped out, built stuff there, and then we spent the other week in Pucallpa, I believe, or at least we flew to Pucallpa, and then we went into the Amazon, crossed the Amazon River in a boat, literally hiking through the Amazon to a site that would eventually become a church. And it was like in the middle of nowhere. We literally had like machetes and we're chopping down, clearing space. It was crazy. I also got like among the sickest I think I've ever gotten there. I stepped on some glass at one point, and I don't remember a couple of the days. That was right in between when we were going from one area. So I just remember like laying in the airport where we were going to take a flight and just like, dead. But I survived, so hooray. Yeah, so anyways, after high school, Silicon Valley, it's like Bay Area, it's pretty competitive, I feel like. Pretty fast-paced, let's put it that way. And so everyone around me kind of knew what they wanted to do in their life. They knew what high school they were going to, or what college they were applying to, what university. That was kind of what everyone was focused on. At least it felt like that. What university are you going to? Not, are you going to school? And then it was, oh, how good was it? There was kind of a stigma, for example, against like community college. And it was just kind of interesting, maybe a little unhealthy, just how crazy and fast-paced it was. And for me, it was like, I wasn't too worried, but I didn't know where I was going to go to school. And an opportunity came up where I thought, you know what, maybe I'll take a gap year and do that thing that all those Europeans are doing or something, a gap year. And maybe I'll do YWAM, which, if you're not familiar, it's called Youth with a Mission. It's an acronym, and basically it's like missions work. Again, this is kind of going off memory, so I might be a little off, but I believe it's you go somewhere and you go to a DTS, like a discipleship training school, where you just learn about, I don't know, the stuff. And I think you're there for like 6 weeks or 3 months or something. So you go to a DTS somewhere far off, and then you spend the remainder of your time after that going and actually serving and helping with whatever your focus was on. And it was pretty like wide ranging. So if you wanted, you could do a music focused DTS, or you could do a sports focused one, or surfing focused one, and whatnot. And even though I was from Santa Cruz, because I wasn't like a child in the surf all the time, I never actually tried surfing. And also, I'm not a lot of meat on these bones, so I got cold really quickly. So anyways, when I was looking at DTSs, I was like, I don't know what I want to do. I mean, none of these really strike me, and none of them are like perfectly what I'm interested in. And then I was talking with my folks, and I don't know, one thing led to another, and basically I ended up hearing about this internship program at a church that was led by a friend of my folks, who's, a lot younger than my parents, but they helped mentor him, I guess, when he was younger. And so I thought, okay, well, let's check it out. I'll talk with the guy, the intern director, and see what it's all about. And he ended up, I guess one of the things that was really helped me make that decision was that he mentioned that it could be a great precursor to YWAM, since the internship was very, I don't want to say physically based, but it was very practical. Let's put it that way. It was very practical, and you learned a lot more. I think a main part of the I think a big portion of the internship was working on yourself. So it was, they had a phrase there where it was saying it wasn't that we use people to get work done. It's that we use the work to get people done. And I think it's kind of like a similar idea, well, kind of, in the military or in like boot camp or whatnot, where you're breaking down a person. You're doing all these crazy things, not because they need to be done, but because you're doing those things to break down the person, to see what they're made of so that they can be remade. Or in this case, it was so that I could see, in adversity is when our flaws really rise up, and so, because it can be really easy to just hide things. Or for me, my big problem, if you want to say problem, was that I'm a pretty laid back and chill guy, and so it's really easy for me to just coast on through life, not letting things trouble me, and be a little bit like, if I had a spirit animal, maybe it would be the dude from The Big Lebowski, where it's like, it would be really easy for me to live that kind of lifestyle, where it's just like, yeah, I'm just chilling, nothing too crazy, and so I think the internship really helped me figure out a little bit more about who I am, who I was made to be or whatnot, and what my struggles were, or where my flaws were. And then knowing those things, I could work harder to overcome them. So it was really cool, and I did the internship at this church for a year. Met people from all over. It was pretty international, and so I met people from Switzerland, from South Korea, from Hungary, from just all over. It was, Peru. Yeah, I met some people from Peru, from Chile, Germany, you name it. It's crazy, super cool. And I liked it so much, and I felt like, there's still a little more I could learn here. And so I ended up doing a second year. And during that time, I would meet a lady who would go on to become my wife. And so you see her pop by a lot, but Ladina, and she was from Switzerland. And so around this time, I was thinking, you know what? Internship was great. This has been awesome, but I still haven't traveled yet. I was working a ton previously, and all throughout high school and stuff. I was working, and I'd work 2 jobs, and then I was working throughout the internship. And so I was thinking, well, I'm saving up all this money because I know I want to travel. So I ended up finding out that we had a sister church in Switzerland, in Basel, and they had a similar internship, but it was a little different. And so I ended up doing an internship over there for 3 months and living in Switzerland. And at this time, I ended up being in a relationship with Ladina, and so starting a relationship. And so I thought, well, this will also be a great opportunity for me to see what Switzerland's like, for me to see what her home country is like, what's the cultural differences, what it's like for me to live away from home in another country for an extended period of time, see if, it would be okay. So I did that. That was amazing. It was really cool, very different. It's funny, my experience there was still rather different than Switzerland in general, because that was Christian Switzerland culture, which was really laid back, like super surprisingly. Like they would have a Schnuni Pause, coffee break at like 9 or whatever. Oh no, I think they'd have a coffee break at like 10, where everyone working at the church would go and we would just hang out, have snacks, coffee, and then at lunch there would be, of course, the lunch break. But as opposed to the internship in America, where it was a lot more regimented, you were gone at this hour, you have to return at this hour. In Switzerland, it was super like, oh yeah, if you're having food with people, just stay out as long as you want, you know. Oh, you can go out and, I don't know, if they're inviting you to their home for lunch, no problem, go, don't worry about it. It was kind of funny because it helped me realize just how big some of the cultural differences are in different parts of the world. And I think when you're from one country, it's really easy for you to get an idea of this is how the world works, or this is how people work. This is how the Western world works. But even things like, say, alcohol, where in most churches, even if you say alcohol, I would say most churches realize that alcohol isn't bad just on its own. I mean, Jesus' first miracle was turning water into wine, that whole thing. But even still, like having alcohol outside of communion or whatever, if your communion uses real alcohol, real wine, which a lot of places use grape juice. But anyways, for a lot of churches, it's like, oh, we can't have alcohol on church, or if the pastor drinks, that's fine, but he just shouldn't really talk about it because maybe some people have a problem with that and we don't want to lead them astray or whatever. But then going to like Switzerland and saying, oh yeah, there's totally beer on church, or oh, what's that? You have like a vacation Bible school thing? Yeah, we'll just have a bunch of beer behind the stage. No worries. It's just like such a non-issue. So I don't know. I thought that was kind of funny, and that radiates to a lot of different areas. But yeah, so anyways, I ended up doing that. While I was still in America, I worked a bunch of different jobs. I worked at an amusement park. I worked at that one marine lab. I worked at an ice cream shop. I worked at a home staging company, which was really awesome. Basically, what that means is if you want to sell a house, one of the ways you can do that is through hiring a company to come furnish it with a bunch of furniture. And so then prospective buyers are looking at the house and they're seeing it fully furnished, so they don't have to imagine what goes where. And it helped out a lot. And so it's kind of like moving, but yeah, it was really fun. So around this time, I knew that I wanted to get married to Ladina and that I was probably going to end up moving to Switzerland. And so I was looking to save as much money as possible. So I was streaming. I started streaming around this time. Post-internship, I realized that's what I wanted to do. And let me think. All right, we'll get into that in a second. First, jobs. I worked at, so one of the other jobs that I worked at also was at a rehab, because I figured with my background, my birth mother was addicted to drugs, and there was one of the guys at the internship came from a drug background or had a history with drugs and whatnot previously, and I had met him before he kind of turned his life around a little bit or whatnot. And so we spent a lot of long nights just talking about all that stuff, and he really changed my perspective on a lot of that, and a lot of, I don't know, drug users or what have you, the homeless. And so that was really, I don't know, it was really interesting because previously I had a pretty, like, I don't know, strict, stereotypical, I don't know, like conservative Christian viewpoint or whatever. I don't know. And I don't know, it just helped me learn a lot more grace, and a lot of, because people have different lives and people have gone through really tough circumstances, and there's just so much behind the scenes that I don't know, it's unfair to just label somebody who's struggling or who's addicted to something as just bad, or why don't they just get help or whatever. Yeah, so that really intrigued me, and I figured, with my background history with my birth mother and whatnot, I wanted to, I don't know, give back. My grandparents also do a lot for the community in Santa Cruz, and the house I lived at, it was my parents and also my grandparents, because part of the reason we moved to Santa Cruz was to be closer to my grandparents so we could help them. And my grandparents helped at a rehab. They were on the board, I guess, or helped establish a rehab. Did a lot of work in that field. So I was kind of inspired by that too. And I thought, well, why don't I? And I think my sister at the time was also, she was a counselor, therapist, and so counselor. I think she was working there. I don't remember if she was working there before or after. Maybe before. But in a different, I think before, but in a different area. And so I thought, oh, well, maybe I'll, see if they need help. So I worked there, and that was, man, the stories I could tell from that experience. It was really cool, but for a long period, I worked overnights there. So that was 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. And part of the reason I did that was because it worked really nicely with if you're working two jobs. Not something I would really recommend. You think, yeah, it's just, 7 hours. You just swap your schedule a little bit, bada bing, bada boom, no problem. It does not work like that. Your body does not adjust so easily. So just be careful. One of my coworkers, he didn't drive anymore because he'd been in like 5 car accidents from tiredness and driving. And so it's just, it was like 4 or 5, 4 or 6 somewhere. It was an absurd number. Yeah, it's just crazy. And you think, like, side note, but you think, what? How can you get in a car accident? Like, your life is at stake. Just stay awake. And I live super close to the rehab, like, not even 10 minutes away. Like, I think literally if you were going really fast, if the streets were clear, you could maybe get there in like 4 minutes or something. But it was in such a way that walking the distance would have been longer, and there wasn't sidewalks for part of it, and so because it's late at night, not the nicest area. It was toss up whether or not it would have been safer to walk or even biking. There's some blind spots where cars could hit you, so it was kind of dangerous to do that too. But yeah, it was just crazy, man. The amount, I don't know, that also blew my mind of how tired you can get when you're driving and you're like, your intention is completely on stay awake, stay in the lanes, stay in the lines, stay awake. My life is at stake here. I only have to stay awake for a couple minutes, then I can go to sleep. But even still, how you can so easily list off. It was crazy. But yeah. So anyways, I forgot where I was going with that. Worked a lot of jobs, saving up. Oh yeah, streaming. So while I was an intern, well, I guess while I was in high school, I had a laptop that I'd saved up to buy. 2008, I believe. 2008, I bought this laptop. and I thought, yeah, I'll use this gaming. It'll be a gaming laptop. It had headphone. The speakers were Beats by Dre, so you know it's good. It's an old HP laptop. That's when I learned that gaming laptops are not a great idea. I'm sure they've improved a ton nowadays, but it's kind of the age-old conundrum of like, sure, you could technically get the best of both worlds, but you're sacrificing a lot. But why have two things that do something mediocre? Or why have one thing that does two things mediocre when you could have something that does something amazing? Like a PC, gaming PC or whatnot. Or the other thing is, if you've got one thing that does two things mediocre, you could have one thing that does those two things amazing, but what's going to take you from mediocre to amazing more often than not is a whole lot of money. And because you don't want to spend that much money, nobody wants to spend that much money, you settle. And so you say, well, this is not as mediocre, but it's still not great. So anyways, I promised myself all throughout high school that I was going to build my own computer, or that I was going to buy a good computer and build it. And then when I was at the internship, I couldn't really build a computer because it just didn't make sense. I didn't have a place for it. You couldn't do it. And so when it's finally done with the internship, I had a bunch of money that I'd saved up, and I bought and built my own computer with the help of a friend. And that was awesome. It was really cool. And so I've been following Twitch since I was in the internship. I was pretty big into the YouTube scene too. In the early days, I mean, saw dudes like the Creatures, Paperbat VG and his Terraria playthroughs, Toby Games. I wasn't a huge fan of people who were like super loud or what. SHOHPKC. I wasn't a huge fan. Sly Fox sound. Okay, I'm gonna stop interrupting myself. But I wasn't a huge fan of people who were super like loud and obnoxious or whatever. So I didn't really watch too many of the biggest guys. I don't know, like PewDiePie was big at the time because I wasn't in scary games or yelling. Just wasn't quite lining up with my interests at the time. Even like Markiplier and who I think came slightly afterwards, but it was Sea Nanners. Sea Nanners was a fun one. So I spent like a good amount of time watching YouTube playthroughs of games that I couldn't get or buy. So that was cool. And then I remember hearing about this Twitch thing and something about like Justin.tv was kind of something that would float around, but I didn't really know anything about that. And then I think it was when Twitch played Pokemon. That's when it really kind of blew up for me, and I was like, this thing is awesome. Like, what? And so I followed it, but not like super closely. And because I didn't have great internet or I didn't have my phone on me that much, couldn't really watch streams. And then I took a stab at like YouTube stuff. I think it's like Terraria or Starbound or something. I think I'd done Terraria a long time ago, but Starbound was like my first little forays into YouTube. And then I figured, well, you know what? I like people. I like talking with people, and I'd much rather do that than upload YouTube videos, playing a game, doing Let's Plays. So I got into Twitch, and I thought it was super cool. And I think that was in 2016. Overwatch. I was playing a bunch of Overwatch, which was also kind of funny. I got into that because I was living with a friend at the time, and I remember I had my Xbox. I guess my Xbox One, and maybe it was 360. No, it was Xbox One, and it was like summer or something, and I was like, May. And I didn't have anything to play that day. And I remember my friend came home with a cup from 7-Eleven, or from a gas station. I'm pretty sure it was like 7-Eleven or a gas station, and it had Overwatch on the side and like Winston on it. And it said open beta May 7th or something that weekend. And so I remember seeing that and thinking like, wait, that's like tonight. sure, I'm not doing anything. Normally, that doesn't look like one of those games that would interest me. I remember seeing like articles about the Overwatch trailers, like Overwatch just Blizzard's new game just had an amazing Pixar level trailer or whatever. And I never clicked on one of those because I don't know, I thought I'm not really interested in StarCraft and World of Warcraft. I dabbled in, but just at friends' houses, so I'll check it out eventually. So me downloading Overwatch was like another revelation, mind-blowing experience where I just had so much fun playing with all the different heroes, and yeah, blew my mind the level of polish that had. So that was cool. I guess we'll hang out there for a second. I'll just talk about a few of the things that really inspired me. A couple of my favorite games of all time. So like Overwatch now belongs in there. Elder Scrolls Skyrim is of course also up in there. I never played Oblivion at the time. I always wanted to get it, but the back looked a little scary. And I'm someone, I don't know, I don't like horror games or scary things. I was kind of scared of like zombies and stuff for the longest time, and I still don't really play horror games. And so, because the Elder Scrolls Oblivion had the game, it was the Game of the Year edition, which had the Shivering Isles. And so there was always a description about the Shivering Isles, and I was like, that sounds a little too intense for young Josh. So I didn't really do that, but I did pick up Fallout 3 when on one of those Peru trips, one of my classmates was, or a guy that I met who was, I think, an underclassman, but he was obsessed with it, and he was talking about this incredible game, and it had like a perk that would let you just explode people into 1,000 pieces if you got it, and you could do whatever you wanted. And crazy. That was bloody mess, the perk. But so I picked it up, and that game series blew my mind too. The music, the atmosphere. Even though it was creepy in some parts, it still was amazing. Going a little further back for GameCube, The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker made a huge mark in my life because I'd come from. I think that was my first Legend of Zelda game. I didn't know what to expect, and just the open world. I love the cartoony style. I think, did that come after Twilight Princess or before? Before, because Twilight Princess had a dual release on the Wii and GameCube. So yeah, it was amazing. The freedom, the fact that like you got these guns. I remember there's one part in particular that blew my mind, where it was almost like a bonus accessory with the gauntlets of strength. I don't even remember if you needed them for the story, but it felt like something that you just discovered by accident. And I landed on this one isle, and the gauntlets of strength, they let you pick up really huge objects. And so I remember I landed on this island, and I saw a giant rock, and I was like, I wonder if I can pick that one up. So I picked it up, and then you got the... It's really bad, but the secret discovered sound effect. And there was a hole, and so you drop in, and it was like a fairy island thing. But just like the idea that, holy crap, like this random island has this secret. If this random island has this secret that I discovered just by exploring and going out of my way, what else is out there? And yeah, so that was just amazing. Graphics are still waiting on the remaster. The Wii U is one of the only Nintendo consoles I haven't owned, and I almost bought it just for the Wind Waker remaster. The fact that I was an intern when the Wii U came out was, I think, part of the reason why I never ended up picking it up, because I knew I wouldn't be able to play it at the time. But come on, Switch release. Super Mario World, Super Mario Advance 2. So Super Mario World for the Game Boy Advance, which is just a port. Amazing. I spent so much time playing that. Mario Kart, Super Smash Bros. Brawl, all those things. Side note on Elder Scrolls Skyrim, it got leaked a little bit before release. Someone got a hold of the game, and I remember there's this guy, Mang, with 2 G's, And because you couldn't post the footage on YouTube, I think he originally did, and then it got taken down. And so then he posted it all on some random website that I don't even remember the name. But he would do these hour-long playthroughs of Skyrim, and this was back when there was no footage of it. It's just like crazy, and the computer went to sleep again. But this was back when there was like no footage. I had read the Game Informer article because I was a subscriber to the Game Informer magazine. It's just like blew my mind. So I would like go to sleep almost. I would watch them in bed and then go to sleep afterwards, and just captured my imagination like no other. And I would watch Let's Players play through that game just to see all the different ways that you could do it. Borderlands was another series that I stumbled upon with that friend from who I went to China with. We were looking through just YouTube, and we came across, I think, a trailer or the old trailer, and we just thought, this game looks awesome. I think it was the original trailer before they redid the art style. And so we kind of kept track of it, and then I saw like a Game Informer article about it or whatnot, and then when we bought it like right when it came out, and just had the time of our life playing it, the original. So much fun. And Terraria I played a lot of too. I like the kind of fact that you could summon your own bosses. But anyway, so that was kind of like a lot of the games that I played. And then let's see. So I did the internship, was saving up money. I knew that I was going to marry this lady, and so I proposed in Switzerland, and we got married. So that was last year, 2018. It feels like it was forever ago. Yeah, that's crazy. That is crazy. It really feels like it was so long ago. June 30th, 2018. And we've been living in Switzerland ever since. I packed up all my things, moved here. Still been streaming a bunch. And I stream because it's fun. It's a great way to meet people all around the world. And then when I was doing that, when I was working at that rehab, I was talking with one of the guys, and I've always been interested a little bit in like martial arts and stuff. I feel like I was the guy who, it was kind of funny. Me and Matthew Clope, who we just had on, we always had kind of an interesting, I don't know if I would say rivalry with who we would choose. So like he was the DC guy, I was Marvel. He liked Mario, I was Sonic. He was more like Chuck Norris, and I guess I was more Bruce Lee a little bit. That we were both Chuck Norris fans and whatnot. And so they were always interested in martial arts and things like that. And so I remember I had a realization where I was working at like the rehab or whatever, and I was thinking, I'm a grown man. I can do whatever I want. Like, I'm an adult. Wait a second. I'm an adult. And I think I was thinking that because I realized my parents never put me in karate or anything, and I think they put my brothers in it briefly, but they never stuck to it. And so I was like reminiscing to one of my coworkers that, I always wished they put me in it. And I realized, like, wait a second. I'm an adult. I can put myself in it. It doesn't matter. Like, what am I waiting for? The only person stopping me, that excuse works great up until you turn 18 or so. And even in high school, like, you've got a pretty solid amount of control. If you want to learn something, just go and do it. But yeah, once you turn 18, you're now responsible basically for your own decisions, and you can't blame your parents. You could blame your parents, but what's the point? Like, when you could change it instead of blaming, change. Do the thing that you've always wanted to do. So I was talking with him, one of my coworkers, and he revealed to me that he had done some martial arts and stuff and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I was kind of like blown away because he was kind of a bigger guy, and he said he got injured through some other stuff, so he didn't do it any longer, but he said he did it for quite a while. And it was interesting because I was, casual knowledge of martial arts and stuff, so I knew like karate. I'd heard of like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but all I knew about it was that Yeah, isn't that the one for the little guy? Like, it's supposed to be really good for people who are small, and I don't know. In my mind, by proxy, that meant it was bad for people who are big or tall. And so I was like, what's the best martial art for someone tall and skinny or whatever? And also, I didn't really want to get involved in that whole CTE, head trauma, concussion thing, which can be prevalent in boxing and stuff. Which even then, thinking about it now, now that I know a little bit more about how sparring works, I mean, that stuff can happen, don't get me wrong, but if you're not training for competition, you control a lot of the intensity and level that sparring goes at. You know, especially if it's something where you're picking your partners or whatnot. Accidents happen, sure, but you can really reduce the chances of something crazy happening. It's like football, right? The chances of you getting I don't know, football might be bad because sparring, when you're practicing, you're going through a lot of stuff. But I don't know. It just feels like when you're not going 120% because of a game or a competition or something, the risk of injury goes down a lot more. Anyways, I ended up, consulting the Oracle known as Google. Kind of surprised, actually. That'd be a good name for Google. Oracle. Anyways, I ended up consulting Google to see, what are some good martial arts? What are the biggest ones out there? And like many others, I stumbled across Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and the fact that UFC, which, we're familiar with. I wasn't also at the time a fan of MMA, mixed martial arts, and UFC. Felt like it was, too violent, too bloody. Not that I thought it was bad, though I think there was a period in time where I was like, yes, those brutal savages, they were just cutting each other, and I don't know. I didn't understand the strategy and elements of things like boxing or martial arts or whatnot, and how it can be like a game, and you're not just swinging haymakers at each other to trading punches to see who lasts longer. It's not the equivalent of like a drinking game or something. Like there's a lot of strategy to it, and there's a lot of training and practice, and a lot of feints and counters and counter attacks and whatnot. So it's like a game. It's really fun. But to make a long story short, I ended up figuring, I'm just going to try Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I mean, after all, if it was good enough to win the first couple of UFCs, which, long story short, UFCs were kind of, it's a long story, but the very broad strokes would be UFC was started kind of to showcase how good Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was, but they got the masters of a bunch of different martial arts, and they said, hey, let's figure out what's the best. And Royce Gracie ended up a smaller guy, not the biggest guy there or anything, ended up beating everyone and winning first few UFCs, and like quite handily. It was pretty cool, pretty crazy story. And I always thought it was kind of funny that apparently he wasn't even the best Gracie, but they figured, all right, we'll choose him over his older brother, who's a lot better than him, because his older brother's a lot bigger, and we don't want people to say, oh, he only won because he's big. So we'll have his little brother, his younger brother. So it's a really cool story. And a side note, if you're ever interested in doing martial art, I recommend just going to a gym. Like everywhere basically has free courses, a free week, free day, free session. Check it out. Literally nothing to lose, and you might just find something that you really like. But yeah, so I figured, I guess it was one of those things where I was thinking about like, what would I love to see myself like? 20 years from now, 40 years from now, what would I look back and say, yeah, I am Joshua Sussman, the blah, 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 blah. I'm really glad I did that. What's going to give big returns in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? So martial arts is one of those things where it's like, it'd be a great way to get in shape. I'm not really strong and physically imposing, and I don't really like fighting or anything like that. And so I heard a great quote that was, pacifism is only a virtue when it's a choice. And that one kind of hit me hard, because it was like, I'm a little bit pacifistic, I guess, but I don't mind. But I want to be able to protect other people too, or if someone's in trouble, I want to be able to help them. And as it stands, my pacifism isn't really a choice. It's because I'm not really going to be able to do much damage to anyone else. And so I think that was one of the cool things that drew me to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was the element of, yeah, you could hurt someone. Sure, you could break arms and blow up knees or whatever. But you have the choice also of you could also just put someone to sleep. You could put them in a hold and... Man, I'm really surprised that my computer keeps falling asleep. Oh. Alright, my computer fell asleep again. Hopefully it should be good. But yeah. So as one of the interesting things about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was that it was like, oh no, this is... You have the choice, I guess. If you take someone down, you have them in a hold. If they do something you don't like, you can put them to sleep, which doesn't hurt them anyway, doesn't leave marks. They'll be out for a few seconds, come back to. It's basically like waking up from a crappy nap where you're all disoriented, then you realize what happens. In theory, if you don't like what they're doing, or you can tell them chill. If they don't chill, you can put them back to sleep again. Not much they can do. You could wait for the police to arrive. Hypothetical situation. Sometimes life gets crazier, whatever. But I like the idea of like, okay, if something crazy happens, I could protect myself or protect others, or you could subdue the drunk uncle, so to speak, or whatever at a party. Whereas something like kickboxing or whatever, you're limited to strikes, which are great, they're powerful, but they're not. You're hurting someone. There's no two ways about it. If you want to stop them, you gotta hurt them. And then, not even counting the whole amount of deaths there's been, just freak accident, knockouts, someone falls, hits their head on a curb, happens. It's rare, but it happens far too often. It's just crazy. So anyways, and then now that I'm doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I'm seeing a lot more the value of striking and learning things like that, because of course you don't always want to go to the ground. And so now it's kind of sparked my interest in martial arts in general. And so I want to learn some striking stuff, whether that's Muay Thai, which is very effective. I mean, those leg kicks look mighty fine. Or something like, I feel like Taekwondo would be fun. If you can couple it with the groundwork of BJJ, so even if you do get swept, there's a lot you can do there. I don't know. Even though it's not, I know Taekwondo is not effective martial art, yada, yada, yada. Anyways, still not bad if I were to add another striking art on top of that. I wouldn't stop at Taekwondo, but I like some of those flashy kicks too, even if not from a self-defense perspective, but from just, they look cool. One of the things that also got me interested was a game called Absolver, Absolver. Criminally underrated in my opinion, but it had one of the coolest martial arts combat systems I've seen, where you go around, you learn different moves from different NPCs or players, and if you beat the NPC or player, then you learn a portion of that move, and so by blocking, dodging, or whatever. And so it was really cool. You could create your own dex combos. But just seeing the wide variety of moves there are out there, or recognizing like, hey, I recognize that from movies, or that hook punch, or I don't know, whatever. That spinning back fist, some of the fun ones. But anyways, so that's got me interested in that. We've kind of covered most of like my main interests. I feel like that's me. I'm living in Switzerland nowadays. My wife is Swiss. She's a teacher, so it made more sense for her to be here in Switzerland, because teachers make a lot more money here than I would make in America. So figured, or than she would make, in America. I'm learning the language, so my German is coming along. I'm not fully fluent or anything, but I'm looking to be. And then there's also Swiss German, which is a specific dialect in Switzerland. There's no official written form, and it varies a little bit from region to region in Switzerland, which is also fun. But it's different enough that you can't just understand it if you know German. And it doesn't help that everyone speaks Swiss German casually. And so it's like, I gotta learn Swiss German after High German And the fact that everyone speaks Swiss German isn't helping my High German because I don't get to practice unless they're specifically trying to speak High German to me. But on the plus side, business world and by law, they have to teach High German in schools. So if I do want to pursue higher education, which I'd be interested in, yeah, there's that. And then I got into podcasting because I love hearing people's stories. And I noticed that there's not really a place. There's not really a podcast right now that tells a lot of, creative entrepreneurs or those digital stars or what have you. I feel like there's so many people out there who aren't really getting spotlit or who aren't getting the ability to tell their stories. And particularly my thought was like in the gaming and YouTube world. But then I want to expand it even further because I have a wide variety of interests. And there's things like music. I dabble in the bass and the ukulele. I'm interested in coffee, martial arts. I don't know. I want to learn how to draw better. I'm an aspiring polymath, I suppose. I want to learn a little bit about everything. And then whenever I dive into one of those subjects, I find all these crazy cool people who I'm like, I wish I knew about them. But I guess that's one thing that I was thinking about is there's so many people in the YouTube and digital space who you'll never see on, or at least you won't see on Jimmy Fallon or whatever, or on daytime talk shows anytime soon, despite the fact that they have audiences much larger than many of the people you do see on those programs. So we're seeing the slow evolution of technology and media, things like that. And I don't know, I want to do my part, help facilitate that, shine the spotlight on some of these people who aren't quite getting seen yet or who just have really cool stories to tell. And as an aside, I just want to learn. I want to learn more about any different area, more about the people, how they got to where they are, and what are some of the tools and tips and tricks that they've learned along the way. So now we're coming towards the end of my own one, but I've got a few questions, I guess, that I usually ask people that I'll ask myself. Like my favorite superhero being Spider-Man, followed closely by Superman. If you think Superman is lame, read All-Star Superman. Amazing. There's just so many. Or Superman Red Sun is another great one. If you want to read a what if Superman landed in Soviet Russia. Normally I don't really love what if stories, but that one was really well done. And All-Star Superman is just a great solo story about Superman. If you're interested in comics, DC The New Frontier is a great one that gives you, it talks about, like the 50s, 60s, 70s of comics or whatnot. Not of comics, but that time period through the lens of comic book characters and new characters being introduced. So like the Flash or Green Lantern, and you see Wonder Woman and Superman and Batman. They're kind of the old guard who stay through, but then you see the passing of some of the other old guard members, like the Justice League of America, the JLA, which was before my time, and the rise of the Justice League I grew up with or whatnot. So that was really cool. Yeah, there's all sorts of good stuff out there. Watchmen, of course, that's a little more adult, but the only graphic novel on Time's like 100 best works of fiction of all time. It's a mind blower, masterpiece. Favorite books? That's a hard one. I like reading. Right now, I've been ever so slowly working my way through Walter Isaacson's Leonardo da Vinci biography, which is amazing. I mean, Leonardo, it's just the more you read about him, it's just like mind-blowing. I want to be more like that guy. Of course, you'll never be anywhere to that level, but just that level of curiosity. I always thought that was kind of interesting about being a polymath or whatnot. Someone who is an expert in many fields or knows a wide range of various topics or what have you. However you want to describe it. I thought it was kind of interesting that it's not limited by your intelligence it's limited by your curiosity. And that's something that Leonardo was a master of, especially when you read through, that book. You kind of really see that the questions he was asking, just crazy, but really cool. Let's see, let me think though. Books. I really liked Gary Vaynerchuk. He wrote some books, and I stumbled across his YouTube channel a few years back. I don't even remember how. I got recommended by a friend. Now I'm remembering. At the same time, I saw he was on Hot Ones, which is a great YouTube show. If you've never seen it, celebrities eat increasingly spicier chicken wings while they're asked amazing questions. It's great. Check it out. I guarantee you will not be disappointed. It's become a weekly tradition for my wife and I to watch some Hot Ones. But yeah. Oh yeah, Gary V opened my eyes to a whole other side of marketing and things like that. That was he was my gateway drug or so into realizing how that whole side of society works, attention and all of that. And that combined with the essay 1,000 True Fans by Kevin Kelly, who was the co-founder of Wired Magazine. Short essay, Google it. If you find it on his website, I think it's like kk.org or something, or kk.org.com. Kevin Kelly. Anyways, 1,000 True Fans, you'll find two. It looks really long, but that's just because there's an abridged version and a long version, and they're kind of on the same page. So if you're just scrolling through, But anyways, it basically lets you know that if you want any creative endeavor to be successful, all you need is 1,000 true fans. And that's a whole lot more obtainable than, 1 million or 10 million or whatever. Great. Check that out. Let me see. Anything else? Practices that have been beneficial for myself. I was running a lot. Right now I'm trying to gain weight, so I'm running less. Maybe I'm just using that as my excuse for why I'm running less. But I want to get back into running again. I actually want to start weight training a little bit, just because, not because I want to get ripped or whatever, but more because I'm realizing now that having muscle and stuff is a really good way to prevent injuries, especially in martial arts, but just in life. It's just, you can think of it like protection for your joints and all that good stuff. Yeah, so just, lift some weights, get some exercise, people. It's important. Now you don't want to, I don't want to, but there's literally no downside, and the upside is so huge. So I'm trying to do that. I was doing a bit of meditation too. Let me think. Not transcendental meditation, but mindfulness. If you're uncomfortable with the term meditation, as I kind of was a little bit because I had a skewed view of it, it's just being present, being able to take a moment and just take stock of how you're doing. It's really great for the risk of sounding cheesy, resetting yourself, centering yourself. And by that, I mean, if you're feeling a strong emotion, what mindfulness meditation helps with is just being able to take stock and saying, okay, what is it that I'm actually feeling? Am I really angry right now? Okay, is anger a feeling that I want to have right now? Where is this coming from? Is this helpful? And being able to kind of, analyze that from a rather stoic point of view or whatnot. So that was really helpful for me, I guess. I don't do it nearly as much, but if you're curious about it, Headspace is a pretty great app for checking it out. It's one of the things that really intrigued me was the amount of high-profile people, like CEOs, business leaders, whatnot. A ridiculous number, like 90% or 75%, 70%, 90%. I don't remember the exact number, but a huge percentage of people practice some sort of meditative practice, have some sort of meditative practice. It's insane. So I figured, hey, if they're doing it, maybe it could help me, and it was helpful. I'd recommend just checking it out. It's one of those things where it's like you gotta stick to it for 2 weeks, because it's really easy to just say, oh, I'm gonna do it for a day. It doesn't have to be forever. Just say, all right, I'm gonna do this for 2 weeks and see how I feel. And if it's not helpful, discard it. But if it is, and for some of you listeners out there, it'll be very, very difficult. It's like eating your veggies. It's hard at first, but you get used to it. It's fine. It only gets easier. But yeah, anyways, yoga, I'm always of like two minds about, but I don't know, like, I'm not, as somebody who's like Christian or whatever, I always want to be careful about getting too heavy into, I don't know, some of the more like new agey stuff. But on the other hand, yoga does have a lot of really good principles, and flexibility, dude, is like super. Especially as I'm doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I'm just like constantly thinking, you don't need to be super flexible, but it's like, oh, if I was more flexible, I could do these extra things right here, or this would be so much nicer. And it's another great thing, I feel like weight training or whatever, strength training. Flexibility only helps you more and more as you grow older. One of the revelations I kind of had was the realization that, like, you don't have to be old and crippled or whatever, decrepit. If you take care of your body, you can, especially with modern technology, but even without that, just taking care of your body, you can do some crazy stuff. I mean, look at like Jack LaLanne, what he was doing in his 90s before he passed away. And when he passed away, it doesn't mean you'll live forever, but he was in great condition when he passed away. It's like, that's the way I want to go. I don't want to go like, really bad, poorly. I'd rather go away, dive at the top of my game or whatnot. So I think that's kind of just something to keep an eye out for. Creative shout outs, people that are super underrated or whatnot. I'm trying to have a mix of people who I think are underrated on the podcast. Of course, I'd love to get larger people, but I always want to keep the like smaller folks too, because I don't know, it's really easy to not see them, overlook them. YouTube, I feel like their algorithm has been doing a pretty good job recommending some folks. So all the guests I've had on previously, check them out, and the ones I'll have on afterwards. Even if you don't think you'll like them, you might just be surprised. Hot Ones is an amazing YouTube show. Here's a kind of a curveball. Those people on YouTube or whatever that are huge, check them out. Like Smarter Every Day for me was one where I just never clicked on it. I don't know. I thought, because sometimes the population, people can be a little weird with their tastes. And so I don't know. I was thinking it would be a little too pop science, a little too popular science. I'm also, side note stream, I'm very interested in science and technology and futurism a little bit, the singularity and all that good stuff. But, which reminds me. But yeah, so that's a sphere that I want to dive into more and spotlight important issues on that front through the podcast. But yeah, so some of the big people like Smarter Every Day, I thought he would be too pop science-y for me. And then I actually started watching some of his videos and I realized this guy's amazing. This is awesome. Same with like Vsauce. Hey Michael, Vsauce here. Just great. Don't discount the big people who even if you think this guy's gonna be too cheesy, you'd be surprised. I'm always surprised how people can change. Heck, even like PewDiePie, for example. If you look at some of his more recent videos, maybe they're not quite your style, but he's matured a lot, and he's not the same guy that he. Don't let the thumbnails fool you. Don't judge a book by its cover. But I don't know. I think that's another interesting element of the podcast is that it can be really easy for us as people to get a skewed perspective on someone, particularly if you're just listening to what a couple voices are saying. Like, imagine if you've got 3 friends who really don't like someone, then it's really easy for you to believe that that person is bad, evil, whatever. But until you actually talk with that person, But if you actually talk with that person and meet with them, you might find that they're totally off about them, or that maybe they didn't like them, but you really connect with them on some level. That's not to say that, that's always going to hold true. There are bad apples out there or whatnot, but still, I would say just have a little grace for people. It's important, man. And then last creative shout out, Wait But Why. So WAIT, but BUTY, WHY. Waitbutwhy.com. You can Google it too. Incredible. I don't think he's posted anything in a while, but still go through. If you're interested in technology, or there's like some great topics on other things too, but things like he actually interviewed and talked with Elon Musk about his various projects, because Musk was a fan of the website. And so Wait But Why is amazing because he goes super in depth on topics, but writes about them in a digestible way that's funny. There's stick figure drawings to break it up, sources and citations and side notes. It's amazingly written, incredibly informative. So if you're wondering about things like Neuralink, or what's the deal with SpaceX, why Mars, Teslas, why is that a thing, or how did it become a thing, what's the ultimate end plan? I mean, they talk about a bunch of other stuff too, but I'm kind of in the process of rereading them too, because they're so good and so much information, and just gives you such a great picture about some of these cutting edge things or topics that you hear about, self-driving cars, things you hear about all the time. It just gives you the full picture. It's amazing. I honestly, that website was part of the reason why I wanted to do this podcast, because somehow I'm very involved in the internet or whatnot, right? And somehow I went years without finding out about it until like last year or something, or 2018, 2017, no, I guess it was last year. Last year I found out about it, and I was like, how did I miss this? This is literally exactly something that I've been looking for. Crazy. Otherwise, that's it. This went on for quite a while. Apologies if there's breaks in the video or whatnot. My computer fell asleep a few times, so yeah, it's weird because I'm pretty sure I disabled that setting on my computer, but oh well. You can find me, as I've written over on the right side if you're watching the video, on Twitch at twitch.tv/DareSussTV. So DERSUSS. That's like the Sus TV. Instagram, Joshua R. Sussman. YouTube, Sussman Original Show. Or my secondary channel, Joshua Sussman. I'm not really doing much on there at the time of this recording, but I have so many video plans. That's kind of my problem. I want to do everything. So I hope to add more. I have a whole list of video ideas and stuff, so I need to get cracking on that. But anyways, thanks for listening. Recommend the podcast to friends and family. Leave a comment if you're watching this on YouTube, because that actually really helps algorithm-wise and whatever. And liking, subscribing. If there's anyone that you would like to see on the podcast, leave that as a comment. And if there's any great resources, websites, something kind of off the wall like Wait But Why, leave that as a comment too, because there is stuff that I'm missing out on. YouTube creators, Twitch streamers doing crazy cool stuff that most of us are missing out on. So share the love. And I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. I'll be tuning in next week for an exciting new guest. That's not me. Hopefully. No, definitely not. And I'll catch you guys later. Thanks for tuning in. Have a wonderful day.